Thank you for inviting me. Maybe just a little bit about myself before we go into this. I'm an entrepreneur builder at heart. I've built a number of software companies, and in the last last number of years, I've been working at FutureSight or building FutureSight with the team here, where we're essentially forming and funding early stage technology and AI companies. So you can think of me both as an entrepreneur, as a practitioner, as a builder, trying to kind of observe what's happening and where things going. We're all investors in some way, if not with a lot of money, with our own time, and we're investing that. And so I'm just glad to be here. Goal is really just to share some of our observations and some of my observations, and really open discussion around where things going with AI. And one of the biggest, I host these kind of weekly lunches or bi-weekly lunches in San Francisco. Have a lot of post-exit founders join, and the constant question is like, where are the moats in this kind of new AI world, as certain things like building software seem to be a lot easier than before. And that's the question we're going to explore today. So in terms of our agenda, I'm going to just do 5 minutes to give you an overview of FutureSight and what we do there. And then we can spend most of our time on kind of investing in AI, the moats in the AI workforce, and I'll share some of our latest thinking. And then we can open for Q&A, and really, hopefully, it could be a really fruitful discussion. And that would be wonderful, because I want to learn from all of you as well. So just to dive in, FutureSight is co-founds and funds vertical AI software companies. So we act as an institutional co-founder, helping founders that we partner with create kind of generational companies. And this is different than being an angel investor or an accelerator or a venture capitalist. We're company builders, and what we do is we're often looking for certain companies we want to build. We're excited about a space, and then we'll partner with entrepreneurs, typically repeat entrepreneurs that have built in that space before, to build that company. And so often when founders trying to figure out, okay, what should my founding team look like, maybe you think of someone that you've worked with in the past. What we provide is an institutional co-founder that you could partner with, and we could build together, and that brings kind of a whole team to bear. The team is just under 20 people, all of us kind of working alongside a couple of the founders we're building with at any given time. And we kind of go through a very structured process in how we build these companies. When we're working with co-founders, we're really bringing a few different things to the table. One is kind of like trying to kind of set the right DNA for the company in terms of picking the right opportunity. That is maybe one of the most undervalued parts of the founder journey, because we often kind of jump into ideas really quickly. And in my own experience, having done that many times I end up realizing like, oh man, I just got into something like that's really a small opportunity. And what we find is the big opportunities and the small opportunities, they take the same amount of work. So the first process is to really get the best opportunity that we can get access to. And that's something that we're constantly doing, have a team doing that. And then we have a co-founding team in FutureSight and a bunch of different resources we bring to bear as we co-create these companies. And we essentially run through a funnel. Thousands of founders. We have maybe thousands of founders applying, and we'll pick a few of those. It's probably like a 2,000 to 1 selection rate to build companies together. So that's a little bit of my background and just kind of where I'm working from in terms of FutureSight. So it gives you a little bit of context, and we can dive into our core topic. So let's just start with situational awareness. This may be kind of a repeat for some of you, but I just want to kind of set the context for all of us around kind of where we're at. So every technology revolution really can have different forms. Carlota Perez has this model, which essentially has a big bang where this kind of new technology is unleashed on the world. There's an installation period. There's a turning point. Often that turning point is a crisis point. and then there's a deployment period, and the diffusion of the technology increases over time. So this is a model. I'm just noticing I have this codex little pet there. Turn that off. This is a model that I think is generally true, and so the question is, how does it apply in each case? And so on the installation period, we're well into that. In 2026, we're just having massive investment in AI infrastructure. I think many of us are seeing this: data center build, semiconductors, memory, all these different components. And this is really, I won't say it's unprecedented because there's been major investment periods in the past, but it is definitely one of the top kind of investment programs in the history of the world, or we'd say if we take a U.S. centric lens in the U.S. And when we look at players in the AI build out, this is kind of just a little bit of a feel of some of these different players: semiconductors, data center kit, data center infrastructure, models, inference. And many of these names should be familiar either from public markets or public market debuts or private markets. And I think we're in this reality where this play, this kind of installation play, has really been played, and the market has priced in where the real kind of opportunity for profit capture is. So, for example, if we think of memory, that's had a kind of a crazy run up over the last year and a half, as the market's realizing, well, memory is one of the key bottlenecks in the AI era. And we can talk more about bottlenecks later. So my general view is that this kind of AI build out is going to continue, but the market has priced a lot of that installation period. And so you have to kind of go further ahead to say, okay, what is the deployment period going to look like? Not just installation, because ultimately no value is created in society by setting up a data center. You have to really have an application layer that's using that. And so the question, I think, for us is, okay, if we look forward into the deployment period, where are the opportunities going to be? And I think that's where we can spend our time today. Of course, we have this turning point, which is a crisis, and there may be multiple crises as we go through this, but one that we've kind of experienced more recently is this kind of SaaS apocalypse. A lot of traditional software companies have suddenly been kind of repriced by the market materially lower. And there's different reasons for this. I mean, one set of data, really shows that legacy SaaS is no longer compounding like it used to. And so you have starting to see in the lower quartile of public SaaS businesses where revenue retention is really going down to flat, that they're not compounding in a way that they did before, and they're losing their compounding ability. And so this is kind of terrifying the market. Is this true across all of these kind of software companies or not? I think there's a lot of debate on that. Is it overdone? Has the market sold off too much? But there is definitely some data that's kind of showing this general thesis that profit pools are shifting towards AI agents and related software and away from SaaS. Another data set that we can look at is kind of legacy SaaS versus AI native peers. And perhaps the SaaS recurring revenue isn't as bad as you might think, because you're like, well, you're not losing revenue. But you can see the AI native peers are growing at very serious clips. And especially as we look at early this year with Anthropic and some others, you just see massive growth rates that are just astronomical in traditional standards. So there is this kind of bifurcation of AI native peers and these kind of more traditional SaaS companies, or to use the pejorative, legacy SaaS companies. And so that's kind of a crisis that we're going through. And I think we still have to look forward to what is the deployment period going to look like. And so this is kind of my second chapter. The first chapter we just covered is context, giving us a sense of kind of where we're coming from. And this next piece is really what I would call the emergence of the AI workforce. And so if we kind of look at AI generally, or the role of software, global B2B software revenue, SaaS revenue, is about 300 billion or 0.3 trillion. But if you look at knowledge work payroll, which is a different spend, right? You buy SaaS tools, traditionally software tools, to help your humans be more productive. But if you look at knowledge work payroll, and I'll just limit this to North America, you're looking at about 8.6 trillion in spend. So you have this kind of massive delta between these two. And what you see, what payroll is really a get work done budget. You're trusting someone to kind of be accountable to get work done, and that person that's getting work done will use kind of software tools to get that work done, and you have this kind of budget differentiation between the two. So just seeing this gives us a sense of like the astronomical scale difference between the labor market and the software market, and there are kind of very large labor pools that are here, and these labor pools are really let's get work done budgets. They're not labor budgets, they're get work done budgets. And so as we kind of look forward into the future, I really see kind of four frames here. The first is, and in a sense, every company, or maybe even individual, but let's say this is at a company or societal level, really gets to choose or work towards which frame they want to be in. There's kind of your classic frame here, where you have human hiring model, where you're just hiring humans to get work done. And in let's say US and Canada, there's about 100 million knowledge workers. And I think what's happening is some companies are going into this second frame and saying, hey, we could hire AI. And so why don't we slow down on the human hiring and let's hire AI to kind of help make our humans more productive, or just add more reasoning to our company and our business, our economy. And so I think you're seeing a lot of that, hiring down, letting attrition play its course, let's leverage more AI, a lot of work to try to figure out how can this be done in companies. The third frame is a new type of company entirely, where you say, yes, we had the traditional structure, we're redoing it from scratch, and we're going to imagine an AI native company. And I definitely see these in kind of in the tech scene and in smaller startups, where you're starting to get massive leverage difference between the old way you used to do it and the new way. And that's, I think, where we have a great opportunity as innovators to say, hey, rather than building a traditional company in the classic sense, I'm going to redesign the org structure of my company to have a lot of AI agents, AI employees doing the work. And so at this frame, I think it would sound somewhat pessimistic on employment for society. And I think generally, when I was just with a bunch of friends yesterday, and we had this whole debate. Everyone's like, "Oh, it's going to be terrible for employment. AI is going to kind of wipe out a lot of the labor market." And I make the opposite case. I basically say AI is going to increase the amount of jobs. And in this third frame, if you stayed there, I would say that is true. That generally in the economy, there's going to be labor loss. But once you go to the fourth frame, you can have a different take. And that's once companies realize that they can get massive AI leverage from these AI native human employees, uh, then they want to hire a lot more of them because their effectiveness and the productivity gains are substantial. So on that basis, I'm very positive, I'd say, in the midterm on employment results as a result of AI. So that'll be this kind of second chapter. But the third here is this question of where will the value accrue? So where does the value go to from here? And I want to just kind of give a couple thoughts on that. So one is when reasoning gets cheap, value moves to the complements. And so this kind of takes us back to some of our maybe economics classes some of us did. And you have an input that gets cheap. So AI reasoning is getting cheaper, 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 better, more accessible. If you invest in AI reasoning itself, it's probably a losing proposition, because the value of that is being deflated massively, right? Like if you have like 10x lower cost on something, your revenue is not really going up unless you have massive increase in demand. And if things are hyper competitive, it's going to be hard. So you essentially kind of lose your profit over time if this kind of new thing is plentifully available, if there's AI reasoning abundance. So the question is, from an entrepreneurial or value capture perspective, and by the way, that's massively beneficial, I would say, for society if my employment increase over time thesis is true. But it's not necessarily beneficial for entrepreneurs because you're just going to compete away all the profit. So the question then is, what are the bottleneck complements that are still scarce, still required, still not obvious, that when paired with AI can capture value? And one way to think of this is a bottleneck complement or a scarce complement really is going to have these four traits. It's necessary to use AI. It's scarce because not everyone can supply it. It's controlled because it's not easy to get access to. And it compounds. It makes AI stronger. So I think in the public markets right now, I think memory is, as I alluded to before, a great example of this where it's necessary. Actually, AI reasoning is almost only as smart as the amount of memory it has. If you have a lot more memory, it can have higher, larger context windows, things like that. It's scarce in that there's really only three major companies that supply it. It's controlled and gated by those companies, and they essentially run an auction if you want access to memory. And it's compounding. It makes AI more useful. So and truly compounds the value of it. So the question then is, what are the things that are bottleneck complements that we can kind of capture that make AI so much more valuable? And just to give some thought on this, if we go back in time, some of you may remember we used to have physical paper maps. You'd buy those maps. You had to buy those from the convenience store, gas station, and eventually those maps became free. Well, where did the value move to? Well, the value moved to local intent and ads. And so, who captured that value? Well, it was really people that were controlling distribution and access to these buyers that really captured this value. And that is, if you look at Meta or Google, the percentage of their revenue that's coming from advertising, they captured a lot of that value. Or let's go to the second one, if cloud compute becomes cheap, where does the value move to? Well, if you remember back in the day, you had to raise, millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars to build a data center and buy all that equipment. Well, now with cloud computing, it's much easier, and the value, that cost dropped, and the value moved to software companies that had workflows and customer ownership. And so, in that sense, cheap infrastructure increases the demand for workflow supporting applications. And I think our question then is, with AI reasoning, where does the value move to? And why does it capture value? And so what we're looking for is really that cheap reasoning increases demand for whatever turns reasoning into trusted works. This is kind of a thesis I'll present over the next few slides. So just to kind of belabor this a little bit more, if we think of the pre-AI labor bundle when we're kind of hiring someone, we're hiring reasoning for sure. We're hiring that they have context of the business. We're hiring judgment. We're hiring execution. We're hiring trust. And we're hiring accountability. And so, in a sense, all these things are components of the labor bundle. When someone hires me, they're looking for all of these things. And so AI starts to unbundle that because the reasoning piece now becomes very cheap. And so what I would put forward is the scarce complements with reasoning that can deliver trusted work are where the value will accrue. And so we'll just talk a little bit about this. And so to say it one more time, AI reasoning plus these scarce complements creates trusted work. And we could talk about what are these scarce complements. And I think there's a number of different ways to look at this. We have kind of internally in FutureSight a list of here's 17 different things that we think are scarce complements. And then our job as we're building companies is to go and say, collect as many of those as we can into a business. And if we can collect enough of them, then we have the ability to really capture a lot of the value or a reasonable amount of the value or an outsized amount of the value that we're creating. So I'll just go through 6 here. Workflow ownership. Can this AI system own the recurring job to be done? Does it have unique customer information and domain specific context about this kind of business problem? Does it have an action layer, or maybe on the technical term, a harness that allows us to understand and act in real workflows, not just advise, but actually do long running tasks that would take a lot of work? Can it run for an hour? Can it run for half an hour, a day? Um, are there learning loops in the system so it can compound learning over time? But also, is it learning capable so it can change what it's learned from the past as new things happen? Can it, the fifth one here, adoption and distribution? And in a sense, this has become more valuable than ever. How to get the go to market engine for these companies, because a lot more people are going to be going to market with things than before. And then the sixth one is trust and compliance. Just to give an example, one of the companies we built is doing AI dementia screening. And as you can imagine, before a doctor would want to use it, they would ask the question, okay, can I trust this system to do this AI system to do dementia screening? And so, yes, maybe in some world or some future time, a doctor could vibe code some AI dementia screening system. But no doctor would be kind of crazy enough to kind of trust it unless it's really been tested over thousands of cases. And so there's a sense where the word trust is huge in this kind of new era of AI employees, AI agents, and AI work. Another way to look at this is what I call going up the AI employee ownership ladder, where at the beginning we're starting answering questions, drafting work, surfacing options, and then we start to get more into the execution and integration, where we're maintaining work context, we're deciding within guardrails, we're executing workflow steps. And then eventually we can own a workflow. We resolve all the edge cases, we own the recurring work. And the final stage to me is capture, that we can kind of own the outcomes and the budget for the work to be done. And so this final stage, I think, is key, because we could have a system that does the work, but if you can't capture the value of that work being done, that'll be hard. And there's different ways to kind of rate these. I have kind of three levels here: AI assistant, task employee, workflow owning AI employee. These are different kind of levels at which AI systems can do the work. And I think when you break it down, you can start to see across different levels of systems. There's thin AI wrappers that don't really have many of these scarce complements. And then there's more sophisticated, vertically focused AI systems that do. And there's very different level of value that can be captured. So I think that gives a little bit of kind of the high level. There's a lot more detail here. There's definitely these two dimensions of value creation and value capture. We alluded to it. But being able to kind of have a company that provides an AI employee to the market. And I think also, as we've seen, the idea of having, say, a service business that is AI enhanced and can really compete against kind of the legacy world. And where I think the value creation will be low will be kind of these legacy SaaS providers that don't innovate, people that own records without action rights, and where there are incumbents that historically have been protected. Think of a law firm. They have good, amazing regulatory moats. But an AI enhanced law firm incumbent could entirely upend that, given the cost structure changes. So another way to think about this is the shape of the software that gets built. And I really think if you go into a business, you can kind of look at the work being done, and there's kind of like two modalities. So like one is where you have a core system of record and many different systems off of that, and then you have kind of humans with this system of action on top. We kind of hit the system of record, and then there's more a constellation of systems where maybe you're in a business and there's multiple systems of record. There's a record for this, for email. There's a record for your customer data. There's a record for this other data, record system. And I think in those areas, you also have humans kind of tabbing between these different systems as they get work done. And I think the shape of the software is different in these two cases. One, I think in the first, you create like an agentic operating system that essentially replaces the legacy system of record. And in the second, I think you really focus on this system of action that's accessing and doing all the work across these systems of record. And I think these are, what I'm seeing right now, these kind of two architectural plays. And it really depends on like how powerful the system of records are or dominant in a given domain. So I think why don't we pause there? Just open for some questions. And there's a little more in the presentation, but we'll open for some questions now. So why don't we do this? If anyone wants to put up their hand or ask a question in the chat, we can field those. Okay, so I'm just looking through what's here, questions that have come in. Okay, so what do you think the ratio between AI workforce and human workforce may be? What will happen to current org structures? So yeah, Basu, thanks. Great question. I think that you know what? The next two slides I had are that question. So why don't we spend a minute on that? So we've kind of gone through these eras. One is this kind of Web 1.0 and capital bought infrastructure, labor, and distribution. We hit this cloud era, capital bought labor and distribution, and we're in this AI area. And the question is, what is capital going to buy? And so this is, I think, the answer to the question. I think we really are between these two eras going to have very different org structures. In the past, maybe you had 150 employees in a company and it looks something like this. Individual contributors, managers, directors, CEOs. And I think in the future, in this AI era, we're going to see something like what's on the right, where you have individual contributors, but each of them are leading 6 different AI agents or AI employees. And so that becomes a very different size of company to start. This would be in the third frame of the 4 that I presented. And you're going to be able to do kind of a lot more with that. And so a lot of what we learned in business school was about how to deal on the left side of this. But I think on the right side, it's an entirely new set of organizational practices. I think the human things we've learned, how to build teams, build vision, camaraderie, all of these things are actually very important, maybe even more important. But we also have to learn, how do we orchestrate, teams of hundreds of agents to do a lot of work, and what is the recycle time or refresh time on processes? And can the AI agents do that, or do we have to kind of have the humans redesigning the AI agents as we evolve our processes?